Hi, my name is Afshin Mashadi-Hossein, and I'm from Bristol Myers Squibb. I, along with my colleagues Julie Rytlewski, Garth, McGrath, would like to once again thank Daar and Pharma for giving us the opportunity to share with you data as a product, a data science framework for data collaborations. So you may have all heard the term data product, and you may have noted that it could mean different things in different circles. We define a data product to be simply data that, much like any other products, come with a set of core features or guarantees. To be more specific, a data product, we define it to be a use case driven, version controlled, tested, reproducible, maintainable, extensible, findable, accessible, and portable data object. Data as a product, on the other hand, refers to or is a framework to make it practical for data science teams to pull together their data wrangling efforts towards collaboratively building data products. So given its attributes, you can imagine many motivations for why this framework could be of interest to a data science team. But let's consider one such motivation, the infamous 80-20 rule of data science. So you're all familiar with it. It is the observation that a data scientist could spend 4 out of a typical 5-day work week doing data wrangling, and in average only spend 1 day for analysis. And when considering approaches to how to address this issue, ideas could vary. But hopefully we all agree that we don't want to advocate for heroic data wrangling. Things like having new data specifications, data platforms that do more, pipelines that are smarter, and even freeing up data science teams by perhaps offshoring some of that data building burden are discussed often. Perhaps a slightly different approach would be to try to drive more value from collaborative data processing, making the collaboration itself easy, perhaps adding a dash of automated standards and putting in place some process to enable collaboration. And this latter approach, driving more value from data wrangling, is one that is advocated by the framework of data as a product in general and in specific for addressing this particular challenge. So the idea would be that you would be bringing in your typical data wrangling efforts, and then you would feed it into this data product building process, and out would come this artifact or data objects, which could then be fed or into many analysis, power many apps, power many automated reports, and thereby be considered reusable entity. This stands in contrast with the case where your data wrangling is so inseparably entangled with your analysis that once that analysis is done, now your data wrangling effort would be considered disposable. So at this point, you may be wondering, we have talked about this notion of a product, but what is the North Star here? What are the core features or principles that we are advocating to call this a product? And one such feature or kind of principle that we are advocating is it needs to serve a coherent set of objectives. So a data product cannot be analysis-ready data for any abstract analysis. It has to have a coherent, specific set of objectives. It needs to be built modularly. It has to have a blueprint for build. Everything that's code, environment data needs to be versioned. It has to be easy to use, platform agnostic. And when we are thinking about all of these principles that we want to aim for, the build tool should have these features. It should naturally support modular development, minimize boilerplate, enable reproducibility by capturing, again, everything, and everything here is code, data, and environment. It should encourage best practices around code and style. It should enable full traceability. And last but not least, makes the build process, it should make the build process easy. So your data science team knows R, they know Git. That's all that should be needed. So staring at this now for a moment, we realized that if this was software, we would have all of the attributes that you're seeking here represented by the set of tools, or covered by a set of tools that typically drives the typical software DevOps cycle. So things like testing, building, pushing, diffing, all of that. But we can't do that with code. I'm sorry, with data. So the delta here is really around, this is not only code, but it has that data element. And that inspires us to think about this possibility of what if we could capture data as code. So let's conceptualize how capturing data as a code could look like. We're reading our input data at this point 1. Then on point 2, we sync our input data components in a standardized and version tracked fashion to our write-only remote data repository, capturing a key set of metadata such as address, label, description, version, etc. for each synced data. Then we bundle this body of metadata that now is representing all our input data, along with our wrangling code, along with our environment attributes, and push everything that is now all text or code to a Git repository. This would be the step 3. From here, we have everything as code. And anyone, including a CI/CD server downstream, can clone and build this data, assuming that they have access to the data repository. And once a machine or an individual has built this data product from scratch, just cloning this code, they can push it to a data platform, to possibly the same data platform, perhaps a different space, using the same standard way and versioning approach. So we have taken this concept that is sketched out here and implemented it in a set of R packages that we collectively refer to as DaaPR. So DaaPR is a family of packages that is, at this point, it consists of these 3 core packages: DP build, DP deploy, and DPI. DP build is to simplify building of data product and is intended for data developers, data scientists. DP deploy is to simplify the syncing and deployment of data product. And this is, again, could be used by data developers, or if automation has been put in place, a CI/CD process. DPI is for simplifying access to data products and is for use for anyone who is interested in accessing this library of data products. So now putting it all together, we can view this data building process as these 4 stages of setup, adding data, adding code, and then deploying your code and your data. But what's worth an emphasis here is that with DaaPR, the extra steps added to a typical data wrangling amounts to a small fraction of the overall time investment in the data development process. So this is a claim, and let's evaluate this claim by walking through the build process together. So the build process, it starts with this setup step, and there is a single function called dpinit that will do many of these setup for you. And by the way, the video is going to be playing in the background. If it's going too fast, all of this video is available in the booth, so please feel free to check it out. But starting with that dpinit, the process essentially starts with setting up your project folder. That will run git init for you. It would run renv, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a fantastic package that essentially creates a sandbox with all your package dependencies captured. Adds remotes for your data and for your code, so where your data and your code will be pushed to, and then records project metadata, which will then help make this data findable and easily understandable. So in the background, this was just completed. So next, it would be onboarding the data. So with the project setup, now you add your input data to the input folder. You set up the promised environment variables. These are keys to your GitHub, keys to your data repositories. You then proceed to map all of the input that you have uploaded. Now, if you have uploaded a couple of files or a couple of data tables, perhaps there's not a whole lot of mapping. But if you have complexities, at this stage, this function will essentially traverse the input folder and create a body of metadata that will allow you to look at what you have and choose optionally what you want to sync into your data product. And that's this staging step. So what comes next is that once you're ready with what you want to actually sync up, Then there's this single function DP input sync, which will then sync all of the selected data tables to your remote data repository. And lastly, once that has happened, then you convert all of the records that you have synced into essentially a text file, a YAML file, and convert it into code. So essentially, this one function DP input write will do that for you, and that will complete the system. So with your project set up, with your data onboarded, next comes the actual work of data wrangling that you would typically do. And this is where you would be spending your 95% of your time, and this shouldn't change in the context of DaaPR. So you start by reading in all of the data sets that you have synced with this single function DP input read. You codify all of the subject matter expertise, how you remove batch effects, how you find outliers, all the things that can't be automated are added and codified here. Next, once you're ready with your output data, you can then put together input, output, metadata, everything that you find useful for that data product, and call a single function DP structure to structure that whole thing together and build your data object. Once your data object is built, then you go through the same process of converting that to a text representation with DP write. Everything at this point is code, so a DP commit and a DP push will get you everything into your remote data repository, or I should say remote Git repository. So now your project is in Git, and everything has been captured as to how you build this data product. If everything has gone as I've described, now a single function DP deploy is all that you need to do, no parameters added, just DP deploy. It will deploy your data product and registers it with a key set of metadata, which will then make it accessible for the rest of your team to be able to retrieve it, look at it, and build upon it. So your rest of the team, who are the consumers of this data product, all they need to know are these three commands: DP connect, which will connect them to the source of the data; DP list, which will list all of the available data, as well as a lot of useful metadata, like who committed this, when, why, what is the Git repository, all of that information. And DP get, which will allow you to finally bring in the particular data product by ID and by version, or kind of clone that data. You can actually there are functionalities around that as well. So this concludes the whole cycle from starting from setup to complete deployment and access. So we have talked a lot at this point around this notion of a data product, and you may be wondering, okay, what does it feel? How does it look like in my workflow? So it could look quite different based on the data developers' kind of discretion and understanding of what the problem is and how this data product should be structured. But in essence, typically it is a list, and it is comprised of functions, data tables, and data tables could cover both data and metadata. Perhaps one of the functions that is of significance that I should mention is this idea of a pin link. And essentially what that is a function call that retrieves a specific version of data. And by convention, we have been using that to capture all of our input data. So in our case, a typical data product could have 100+ input data sets. Now we make each one of them a pin link, and therefore it makes it such that the data product itself doesn't become overly bloated in terms of the size. So how it would look like is that you have, let's say, this DP study 1, topic 1, and you can $sign to input, $sign to clinical, $sign to response, and this will essentially pull from that specific data that is in your remote, pull it in your local environment. So at this point, perhaps if you are interested in this framework, it's good to kind of mention some of the limitations and considerations. So I mentioned that DaaPR is centered around this tabular data. However, it does not natively impose or accommodate a relational data model. So if that is of importance to you and your team, perhaps this is a consideration to bear in mind. DaaPR is not intended for large data tables. Lots of smallish, each 100 of megabytes tables work just fine doing this pin link idea. If you have big data tables, it's subject to the problems of big data. DaaPR does not address the data governance piece, so data platforms with governance management could complement DaaPR. And perhaps the most important thing that I would like to share is that DaaPR and the packages that is built upon are very young. So when you're thinking about an awesome package like pins or a great package like REnv, both of these are themselves pretty young, and they're critical to the functionality of DaaPR. And DaaPR is even less young and or more young, and it's still maturing. So at this point, in summary, I'm hoping that at least some of you are partially agreeing with the claim that Daap framework can enable data science teams to trade up on data wrangling. So the idea would be that you bring in your usual data wrangling, you add a dash of process, and then trade it up for a data product that comes with all of these nice features that we have discussed. In terms of our ongoing development, they can be captured by perhaps additional layers or elements that we could add to this development cycle that we are envisioning for any data products. Specifically, we are working on kind of a statistical-based diffing of data. We are working on adding vignettes around how to automate the build process, as well as data testing. We are considering adding more metadata to enable data observability and monitoring. And then there are some cool possibilities around spinning up and spinning down data based on demand. Again, everything being code, that could be pretty straightforward to do. So with that, we wanted to, again, take a moment and thank Pharma, the organizers, and the community, and as well as our BMS Informatics and Predictive Sciences colleagues who have been critical and very patient with us in doing experimentation and giving us great feedback, and all of you for connecting here and being part of this conversation. I would be happy to answer a few questions. I will also try to pop into the booth at the expo. So if any one of you wanted to follow up one-on-one, I would be happy to have a conversation around this project. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. I think we have like 1 minute for one question. The question about whether it is too expensive to store the data, especially when it comes to large data. I think you already answered in your limitation. But another question came from, when can we get our hands on DaaPR?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks a lot. Great questions. So as far as getting your hands on it, so the code is all open source. It is on, if you go to the expo, there's a link on GitHub for accessing the code. You can download the packages and start playing around with it. I would love to collaborate with this group on building it further and refining it. So yes, please check it out and let me know how it goes.
Thank you, Afshin.